let's start off with this. You have to make the decision right here and now that you want to be a business person, because this industry ain't playing. MedMan bankrupt. Everybody, well, you can't say bankrupt because federally illegal, no bankruptcy protection. But you have big MSOs that are no longer in the game. So this notion of, oh, I can do fireweed and that's all that I need to do. And what I did in the trap game, I can do over here in the regulated game. Get it out of your mind. Alfred, am I lying? Get it out of your mind, because the money is not fair, because y'all messed up the money from 2016 to 2020. So now you have to be strategic. Everything that Zachary told you is absolutely correct. My girl, Jasmine, raise your hand in the back. Jasmine did a podcast and she said, you have got to vet all of your investors and everybody you know. Zachary told you that. But you have to ask someone. Jasmine made a really good point in her podcast that this is a small industry within a bigger industry, right? If somebody calls me, I can make one phone call to Alfred, I can make a phone call to Chauncey, and I can find out everything I need to know. You have got to adopt the same philosophy. And you have to see if they have some money. Zachary told you that. But you have to ask for financials. You have to ask for pro forma. You have to, when they ask you for a budget, you have to do a budget. And you have to get out of your mind this template work that you want to do. Y'all want to borrow somebody else's work, put your name on it, and then pass it off. But you don't know what's in that document. I see operating agreements that people do, every type of documentation under the sun. And when I say, do you understand what this document says? They have no absolute idea what the document said. And you know what they say to me? Oh, I got this from so-and-so. You need to take advantage of your licensing people out there. I'm the operations and the deal making person. I'm not your licensing person, okay? But I do licensing work there. But you really need to know what your partners are all about, because what we're seeing in the industry now, the partnerships are going awry. And I get that call. I want to be like Zachary and get the call ahead of time. Now, Ceci called me ahead of time, but she's now in another situation. But at least she made the call ahead of time. If you can buy a $600 wig, if you could buy some shoes, if you can go to Magic Mountain to Disneyland because all that crap is high, you can afford an attorney from the low pro bono. Don't call me, because for social equity, I'm $380 an hour because y'all headaches, okay? So call low and bro bono, call those folks, 40 hours. Zachary, is that unbelievable? That is unbelievable. And let me tell you why this is so important. You all don't have money for litigation. You don't. I am in a litigated cannabis case where we haven't even gotten to mediation arbitration. The bill is $275,000. Okay? And that is just because people didn't write down documents. Don't give me a text. Don't tell me he told me so. I deal with big MSOs all the time. They switch over people. You might have talked to Larry, but Larry did not have the authorization. That is why it's so important what Zachary is telling you. If it's not, we learned in law school, in the four corners of the document, it doesn't exist. You have to be specific. You have to have everything meshed out, because you have to figure out if you all are on the same page. I always talk about it's like getting a spouse, but now it's like, do you want kids? Who's going to do the chores? You have to be specific, because I can guarantee you 9 times out of 10, what you talked about in the beginning is not what's going to happen at the end. Because when people see the money coming in, folks get funny. And if you don't have that documented, There is nothing you can say. And I hate when people send me a text. You are grown business folks. Do you think the head of Xerox is sending somebody a text as their evidence of something? You've got to make the decision here and now. DCR has so many resources for you. I know people don't take advantage. Alfred's going to talk a little bit about that. You need to go in the LMS system. Anything that you need help with is there. The license, I know it's so important to people. That's 1/2 of 1/16. The business is what's important. And you have to be and act like business people, not ex-trappers, not trappers in training, but business people who have documents, who have to understand what people are telling them. So I'm going to let Alfred talk about his story. I want you to talk about some of the DCR resources. You had problems with investors, what that looks like, and tell them about your success story now in your retail dispensary, okay? And then we'll go with Q&A with Zachary and I. Go.
Thank you, Miss Tony. How's everybody doing this afternoon? Yeah. Before I can say it's a success story, we just getting there, you know what I'm saying? So I won't claim success and victory yet, but we are well on track, if you will, because we're open. I'm the founder or co-founder of Spaceflight right there on La Cienega and Jefferson. And I started my journey in 2019, round one, phase 3. I put in my license and that application, which we thought was we were applying for a license in 2019 in that initial run, right? And we were actually just putting our name down in a lottery to then later apply. We won a golden ticket to later apply, right? And so I got my license in like 72 seconds. It was crazy. And from there, everything kind of like changed. We all know this story that went through DCR and what we had to overcome to get through this. I didn't come into the cannabis industry to be a advocate or some type of legislative lobbyist, if you will. But what I found out really fast is that we're getting into a legal game. We're getting into a real estate game. This is a whole new kind of growing industry. Now we're going to have to become the lobbyists that we see at high level in other industries that actually make the things move behind the scene. And so I was already producing large festivals in the city of Los Angeles. Started the West Adams Block Party, one of the producers of the Leimert Park Juneteenth Festival, and several other festivals throughout the community. And so that just opened the room for me to understand who the bodies were, right? Because I was doing licensing, I was doing special events, so I was dealing with LADBS. I was already dealing with the inspectors at different bodies, if you will, DOT, all these different places. And, these are not all the same type of bodies that you have to deal with getting a license, but it's very similar in nature. And these are dealing with this civic engagement. You got to figure out to build these relationships. It's one thing to be standing behind an email and sending an email to somebody. It's another thing to see like a face on the other side, because people that work in the city are just humans just like us, and they're just people. So once you start to like make those relationships, now you can have more straight line conversations and things get a little bit more streamlined. And so when we start talking about the cannabis industry and you coming from other industries, right, we hear this word transferable skills a lot, right? These transferable skills, because business is business. And so my transferable skills in logistics and civic engagement from the festival industry transferred over to the cannabis industry, which allowed me to get through my license process a lot more streamlined. And I can then help other people figure out things, if you will. And that kind of led us to just social equity advocacy work. And so I became a founding member of the Social Equity Owners and Workers Association. And we just had to advocate and fight for what we believe the law should look like. In different instances, we rallied just last year for SB 51 with Senator Bradford to extend the license provisional license on the state level. And now, mind you, I'm already open. but it's still not over. So the commitment is to the total vision of social equity. So I went back again to, help the entire industry that are social equity operators to be able to have this license opportunity, because I understand that, listen, if you hear, we are all in the same game. We are not against each other. We're not competitors. Knox said it. We have to collaborate, and it's hard because in business, it's like, we got cliques and silos, and we got to figure out a way to break through that and create our own. And everything around us is telling us not to do it, and giving us all the reasons and the shiny things and objects so we don't do it, because the power is when we come together. We could say that from a biblical perspective. Y'all know that story. Or we could say it from a professional business story. If we come together and actually start to have a vertically integrated supply chain that we can control, that's not corporate ran, that's not all these committees and all these other bodies and entities that we don't see representing us and our interests, we really are not going to be able to compete on a big level. We're really just setting ourselves up to have an exit, and hopefully you can have a good exit, if nothing else, because this game is not really, we say social equity, and we know what that could mean, and it could mean so many things. It could mean, trying to do it right and give people an opportunity to have equity in an industry, like we say, right? That's not what these private investors are trying to do. Let's keep it a buck. They're not trying to do that. They're trying to make their families more richer. Nipsey said it one time, it's really hard to even get buddy with somebody across the table when you're negotiating with them, because when you do that, you start to let your guard down. You start to get all comfortable with somebody. Now it's even, I like you. It's hard to play hardball now, right? And we're playing hardball into the dot is signed. And let me tell you, I'm not gonna sit up here and act like I got it all figured out, because we're still unfolding this thing. Like, we don't know what we don't know. But I tell you this, we are at a time where we have to stand in our power. You really have to know what you're worth. And it's going to take you doing the research. It's going to take you reading all of the different points in the LAMC, and it's not something that you got to retain, but you got to be familiar. You got to know where to go. You got to know how to reference it, because it's a reference guide. It's not something that you're going to just throw in there and remember and recite, but it's something that you have to know where to go. You have to know how to use your power. They gave us 51, 51, 51. And what does that even mean? If you are tier one, right? What does that mean? Do you have control? Is there a super majority in place? So we have to, I was giving Knox, his flowers, because the way that he speaks to us, it's in a very simplistic way that we can kind of gather it. It's not so legalese, because we have to really understand the law. That's what this boils down to. You have to become a real parishioner of the law. And then you have to understand real estate and that whole thing, and business, right? And business is business no matter what business you're in. But it's, I'm kind of like going around, right? But in my particular situation, I have a store on La Cienega and Jefferson. Me and my business partners are venturing into growing a big business, multiple stores. We have a second store on Jefferson and San Pedro. Now, granted, they got the money. I bring value to the table, right? It's really on me to actually show them in a material fashion of why they should keep me on the cap table the way that we said we were going to be on the cap table. We said we're on the cap table, boom, this is what we're doing. Now we're going to build this business. We're going to keep acquiring. This is where the finance come from. Well, what's your thing? What are you going to do in the business? If you think you're going to just be a business owner while they go build the brand, the business, get the customers, and then they going to deliver you a check, mailbox money, I'm not a comedian. I'm just saying that's not going to happen. Don't wait on that check, That's not going to happen. So you have to figure out what you're going to do in the business. Like, literally, what are you going to do? And go back to your transferable skills. You might be good at graphics. You might be good at whatever you're good at. Like something's transferable for sure. And then there's the business development and growing the business and figuring out where other things are going to go. But, I'll pause there because I don't want to just ramble or whatnot. And I know that the room is full of like great, like we geniuses in here. Like I don't want to act like I'm talking down to y'all because I know that I can learn from y'all too. You know what I'm saying? Like I know that we know this and we got this, but you gotta really know it when you go in the room, when you get across that table, so we can get the deal done correctly.
Thank you, Al. Thank you. All of you at your desktop should have LA Municipal Code 104.20. Ain't that it, Cairo? If I know it, you should all know it. That's social equity. And it's going to tell you about the management services. It's going to lay out everything. Alfred brings up a good point. People come to me, I don't even know what 51% means. That means you got to keep your 51% equity. Zachary talked about it earlier. That means only 49% for everybody else. But if you're trying to figure out how to structure your deal, you've got to stay at that 51%. So what does that look like and what does that mean? So then you've got to figure some things out. All of you should have a copy of his presentation and then go and Google. And this is what I tell people, there's no excuse for not having the information. They have AI on Bing. I was looking up something because I'm going to be in DC, and I didn't know where we were federally with all the safer banking acts because everything changes so rapidly. So I put it in the AI on Bing. I got all the information. You all can do that with some of the concepts that Zachary has talked to you about that you may not know. I learn every single day. Zachary's presentation, I was writing things down. Why it's so important is this is what's going to sustain your business. Correct, Alfred? You've got to be a participant. You've got to know the business. And if you don't know the rules, you don't know the game. And you want to master the game, which means you got to learn what the rules are. And so you have does everybody, show of hands, let me know if you know who your analyst is every hand should be raised here because that is your individual that's going to give you the information with what's happening in LA. I call the analyst. Hell, I will call Ethan or Cairo. I wrote Cairo email the other day just to see if things change. You have to take advantage. And I know sometimes there's distrust with government maybe, but you used the LMS system, didn't you, Alfred? And tell us about your experience there. And I'm not trying to hype up DCR. I'm trying to give y'all the information you need to be successful. And if you don't know where to get it, my duty is to let you know where to get it.
Yeah, no, I definitely use the LMS. The corporate contract, I think is what it was. It was a couple of different series of those. There's a lot of different pieces. I'm gonna be honest with you. If you think you can run your business by yourself, that's not gonna happen, right? It's so many different specialties that it's going to take to run this business, right? So you're going to have to hire these specialists. The LMS is really good to help you understand what these specialists are going to be doing, right? So you can just understand the basics, really. And then from there, you kind of can have an educated conversation. The worst thing that you could do is go get the low bono, pro bono assistance and not know how to use your hours. And you're just there talking to an attorney. He's on the clock. He's like, well, I did my 10 hours and y'all didn't really talk about nothing. You didn't really get what you need. So it's important to really do that research. I like the LMS because I like watching videos. We in this video world, I could turn the video on in my ear pod and keep going, or I could watch it and take notes depending on how I want to do it. Sometimes I listen over again just to kind of help retain the information. Everybody learns differently, but I like that at your go, at your own pace type of learning stuff, because then you can, I like to throw on podcasts and videos and just ride sometimes. So you still get that information. So it's a benefit there, but they talk about everything, pretty much. And what I noticed is I said, oh, well, you got to add it. And then they added something in there. So they are updating it as well. So yeah, good job with that.
Okay. So I'm going to give you all a tip because I tell my clients to do this. Before you talk to an attorney, email them your set of questions. So you're utilizing your time and their time wisely, because Alfred is correct. I'm on the clock. You can talk about Sally Sue just as long as I'm getting paid, but that's messing up your stuff and you're trying to get the information. So you need to write down what questions you have for the attorney. So another thing I want to talk about, and Zachary, you can help me with this one. I know later on we're going to talk about operating agreements, and that is such a huge thing. Huge, right, Alfred? I mean, huge, because that sets the rules of engagement for your business. And one thing that you all have to understand, because I go against the MSOs, they do not have your best interests at heart. They don't care. I'm on tape, so I can't use flowery language, but they do not want to see you win. And so they're going to say things to you like, I need this back by 3:00. You need to tell them you're not going to have this. This is an important document. I need to have it reviewed. And if they can't wait for you, then you don't need to do business with them. Because if anybody's going to rush you through your process, then that's not somebody that you're collaborating with, right? Because that's the word Zachary talked about, collaboration. Make sure you do that. Like Jasmine said, you're vetting them. You're seeing, do these people have money? You're calling people in the industry. Have you heard about so-and-so? Before I have a talk with a client, I make a call to see who this person is. What should I know about them? Okay? And then you've got to understand what the rules are there to help you ask the questions. So that's why I'm always telling you to go back to the code and look at the code, because as one LA rule, if this person is asking for equity, they cannot have a management services agreement. Two don't mix, can't have both of them. I'm going to tell you every single operating agreement contract, they're trying to do that, every single one. So right then and there, they know the rules of the game, but they're trying to, what's the word I'm trying to look for? They're trying to take advantage of your lack of information. So that's why you have got to get the information. And the information is there. So it's absolutely no excuse. Now, I have a young lady in the back who came to me at the MCBA because a big MSO, was trying to trademark, take her stuff, confidential information. That's a whole different ballgame. That means that now we've got to set her up with success. All that information that Zachary was telling you about trademarks and all of that, let me tell you how that fits for all of you. I get all kind of, can you do a white label agreement? Okay, I can do a white label agreement. Zachary, what are you going to need when people think about white labeling agreements? Aren't we talking about confidential information with how their stuff is being manufactured, and you're giving it to somebody? And you're not thinking of an NDA, and you're not thinking of maybe I should limit it to 2 people, and you have to put some kind of contract that there's some consequences behind it. Because if I'm an MSO, if I get a little slap on the hand of $30,000, that doesn't make any sense. But when I put in my contracts, I ask for punitive damages. And punitive damages basically means that if it goes, I'm going to slap your hand real bad if stuff go bad. because I'm going to ask the court not only for my compensation, but you've been a bad boy, so you're going to pay me for being a bad boy, or my client. All of these things you have to talk to the attorney about. Who's that exiting plan? That was you, Zachary, or both of you. How are you guys going to terminate these LLCs when it all goes wrong? Have you talked about that? Is that going to be a vote? If it's going to be a vote, is it going to be a majority vote? Zachary and Alfred talk about supermajority votes. Okay, is that going to impact? Does it have to be unanimous? You have to think of all of this, the right of first refusal. Are we going to have something in the contract where if your piece goes bad, we can all purchase your piece? All of these things you have got to think about. That's why you should be sitting in the room, for all of you just starting, sitting in a room and thinking to yourself, since we're talking about investors, what is the goal? What do I want out of my investor? Are we on the same page with the business? Because if you're not on the same page, it ain't gonna work. You all need to learn how to do a SWOT analysis. Strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. You have got to be able to tell somebody in 13 seconds about your business and what sets your business apart from any other retail business on a street.
Yeah, so we're talking about getting incentives in alignment, and everything she just mentioned is all on the table. Only a couple of things I would add. Liquidated damages clauses are really motivating. And for those of you who are not familiar with them, a liquidated damages clause says if you break the contract, you have to pay X amount of dollars out the gate, right? If we're doing an IP licensing deal because we want to do some white labeling, you infringe on my mark, you take one step outside what I've authorized you to do, you need to pay me $1 million, right? Plain English, clear as day. That'll be a motivating factor for them to act right. And I bring up that example because the situation where I saw it go wrong, MSO came in and did a deal with an equity applicant here in California. And the MSO was vertically integrated. So they had manufacturing, they had cultivation, and the equity applicant wanted to do some branded products for their retail store. So they did a deal with the MSO to produce their branded products, but there weren't enough guardrails on it. So 6 months later, this equity applicants' branded products were showing up in other states. And they didn't have a piece of any of that. So yeah, they were getting a chunk of what their products sold in their store, but they were getting none of what was being sold with their brand, right, in other states. And the MSO's argument was, well, you gave us authorization to use this brand. It wasn't limited to California. It wasn't even limited to your store. We're paying you based on what gets sold in your store, but there weren't enough guardrails there in place. So you have to think about all these things. You have to think about the limitations. You got to think about how far-reaching an agreement may be. And again, you need to have some knowledge of these things, but you're not going to be experts in any of them. So that's the importance of making sure that you get with service providers who are protecting your interests that you trust, right? Do not rely on their attorneys. Do not rely on their consultants. Okay, it's nice if you have your own representation and your representation and their attorney are in agreement on something, but then at least you have somebody who you trust who is going behind and saying, no, this is okay, this is okay. This might not be okay, let's go back and revisit this issue. But having that thorough review is critical. And then having the guardrails in place, whether it's a punitive damages, whether it's a liquidated damages clause, those are guardrails that your service providers should be advocating get into your agreements.
One thing I would love to say, and it's a little bit of tall of an order, but if at all we could gain control of the real estate before you have to bring investors to the table, it'll give you the ultimate leverage. It's the tallest thing that we can do, though, because that's one of the most expensive parts of the puzzle, right? And we often need investors to do that. But we should maybe look at some alternative methods, and maybe you can build a fund or some type of fundraise on the real estate side. Find something. It's really tough because it's like, well, you gonna buy it? That's one thing, right? Or you just gonna control it. Controlling it is all you need to do. You don't have to buy it. We want to buy it. Ultimately, the ones you want to buy the most, the ones that they probably don't want to sell, most of the time. But or the price is crazy. But if you can even just get the lease or make the relationship with the landowner, it is possible. You know what I'm saying? Every landowner's not out of touch. It's just that, one of the things that got me early in was I had a property that was not on the market because I knew the property owner, and I was able to tie up that property to go forward. And that property ended up not working out. But I want to throw that out there, that is a possibility. You might know somebody. It might be a building that's like, oh, it's hiding in plain sight, and it's a person that needs you. It's possible. So think about that.
And just to piggyback on what he's saying, anything that you can do on your own to add value is going to be meaningful when you get into that negotiation. Securing property is a huge one, right? But it may not even necessarily have to be a lease, right? If you have a binding letter of intent to lease, that should be enough to get an investor's attention. You got property secured in a way that other folks don't. Okay. And that contingency could be upon that property being approved for a cannabis operation. It could be on the actual issuance of a permit or license to operate there. It could be conditioned on you receiving the funding necessary to get the business open, or all of those could be conditions, right? And you can cut that deal with your landlord in advance. Again, you're going to need some help. You want to make sure that the rental rate is fair, that the terms are reasonable. But if you can lock that down ahead of having the conversation with the investor, you have just increased your leverage incredibly.